Welcome to our video recording on chemistry of life. You should be completing your notes as we go through this presentation. Terms that need to be added to your notes are highlighted in red. You should, by the end of this, have filled out the complete first page of your notes packet. So we're going to start with chemistry of life. This is going to tie together our introductory unit on sort of reviewing chemistry and chemical properties and where we're heading. So really focusing on biology, the study of life. The essential question that's going to carry through this entire unit is, how are structure and function related? So we're going to look at the different types of molecules that make up living things, study their structure, study their function, and then relate the two. So how does what something looks like help it to do its job? What we're really studying in chemistry of life is we're studying what's known as biochemistry. If we break this word up, we know biology is life. So this is biology, the study of life. And chemistry is the study of elements and compounds. So what we're doing is we're going to study the elements and compounds that make up living things. There's another sort of branch of chemistry that's very closely associated with a lot of the topics we're going to be covering, and that's organic chemistry. We're going to talk about where that term organic in organic chemistry comes into play in this unit. So again, this unit is going to focus on carbon-based molecules. So we know that most of your body, 60 to 75%, is water, and the vast majority of your cells, what makes them up, is water. However, the part of the cell that is not water primarily consists of carbon-based molecules, 4 different types of carbon-based molecules that we're going to go over. And those are the ones that you're going to be responsible for understanding the structure and function of. Now, in science, we need to remember that the term organic is not the same as how we would use it in everyday life. The term organic refers to compounds that contain carbon. And the entire branch of chemistry, organic chemistry, purely looks at carbon-containing molecules. And we have to ask ourselves, what's so important about carbon? What special properties does it have that merits it having its own branch of chemistry to study its structure and function? And so here's an overview of some of the properties that make carbon such an important molecule and why it's essential to life. So carbon can make 4 covalent bonds. If we look over here, what we have is a carbon molecule. It's a very simple molecule with 6 protons and 6 neutrons in the center, and then we have our electrons out here. Our first orbital is filled with 2 electrons, but our outer shell orbital, we notice that it has 1, 2, 3, 4 electrons. From our first unit, we learned about the octet rule, which tells us that atoms want 8 electrons in this outer shell in order to be stable, happy atoms, which means that carbon is willing to make 4 bonds. And it's willing to make single bonds, so it can bond with 1, 2, 3, 4 different molecules coming off here. Double, meaning that it'll share 2 pairs. Triple, so it can share 3 of its electrons. And quadruple, meaning that you can have carbon bonded to another carbon atom where each one is sharing every single one of its electrons. And we remember from our first unit too that covalent bonds are the strongest of our different types of bonds. And the more bonds, single up to quadruple, the more covalent bonds that atoms share, the more strong that connection is between them, and the more energy it would cost to break that connection between those 2 atoms. Like I said before, it's only got 6 protons, which makes it a small and flexible atom, meaning that it can fit into small spaces without needing to change the shape of molecules very much. And the last one is that it likes to bond with itself. So you can get long chains of carbon bonded to other carbon atoms, bonded to other carbon atoms, which is very important for when we're looking at our living molecules, our biological molecules. So an overview of what I was talking about. For all these reasons, carbon is really good at forming long, complex chains of molecules. And these long, complex molecules form the basis of life. So each of the molecules, whether it's making up a part of your skin or your kidney, is filled with these long, complex carbon-based molecules. We have a few examples down here. These right here are some just common examples of different carbon-based molecules. This one right here, which is unlabeled, this is the structure of DNA. And this one right here, which is also unlabeled, this is vitamin B12. So living molecules, we notice that they range in complexity, but they can get very, very complex. They get more complex than this as well. Now, we start with these long, complex chains of carbons. But the way that we're going to get variation, so molecules that behave very different ways, is by adding what are known as functional groups. So by adding other atoms to these carbon chains, it's going to change the behavior of those. So an example that I have for you guys, if we start right here with methane. Methane is a gas, and it is very simple. It's just a carbon with 4 hydrogens. So this is an example of a simple hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon molecules are called hydrocarbons because they're just purely hydrogen and carbons. Now, if we take this molecule and we start adding functional groups, it's going to change its function. So if we look right here, this is methanol. It is a methane, but instead of having a hydrogen here, you have an alcohol group. This is going to go from being a gas at room temperature to a liquid at room temperature. Different behaviors. Over here, same basic structure, except we've added a carboxyl group, this COOH, onto this, and this is going to turn this into an acid, so changing its behavior. Here again, we have our methane, but we've added an amine group, so NH2 off the side of this one. This is going to be a different gas. It's going to be a derivative of ammonia. Very different behavior as well. Now, you guys are not responsible for knowing the names of these functional groups. Just realize that their role. So when you look at a molecule and you spot these on there, what it's saying is that this group right here is changing the behavior of this molecule because it is present. So quick check. Take a look at this molecule right here of glucose and see if you can count how many functional groups are in this molecule. Good, so hopefully you were able to get that there are 6 functional groups. So here's one on the end, and then you have 5 of your alcohol groups. So as I said, there are 4 major categories of organic macromolecules, big molecules with carbon in them. And here they are. So these are the 4 that we're going to be studying in detail, the structure and function of these molecules. The first one we'll go over is carbohydrates, then lipids, nucleic acids, and proteins. We'll go through these one at a time and look at them in much greater detail. But this is sort of where we're heading in this unit. Now, in order to look at the structure and understand, we need a little bit of vocabulary. So we're on part 2, unit terminology. Now, the first term we need to be familiar with is polymer. Large molecules are made up of repeating units, and those large molecules are called polymers. So because they're big, we call them macromolecules. And since they have carbon, we're going to call them organic. So sometimes I'll combine terms. I'll call them organic macromolecules. I'm saying it's a big molecule with carbon in it. Or maybe I'll call it an organic polymer, meaning that it is a carbon-containing molecule made up of many repeating parts. So if we look right here, is a small unit. And we notice that if we just take this molecule and repeat it over and over and over and over again, and then we create these long complex chains with it, that's an example of what a polymer is. What type of molecule we're looking at is going to have a different basic structure, and it's going to have a different final structure as well, both of which are going to determine the function or job that it does in your body. Now, this word polymer, we see the prefix for it many times in our life. So you've, in math class, learned about polygons. There is a disorder known as polydactyly. So you'll notice a person or animal suffering from polydactyly has many fingers. And then we also, in social studies, learn about polytheism, so religions that have many gods. Now, these large polymers are built, as I said before, from smaller units called monomers. So if we look right here, here's an example of a monomer. So it's a single unit on its own. If we take this monomer and just repeat it, so it's like it's going through a copy machine, just over and over and over again, and we do this many, many times over, that's how we form a polymer. So again, monomer, the prefix for monomer, we see many times in our lives as well. You guys have all probably seen someone with a monocle. Maybe you have played Monopoly. Hopefully you guys have seen The Incredibles. It's a good movie. So you see right here, it says, "You sly dog, you caught me monologuing." Also, when you do Romeo and Juliet later on, you'll have to read some monologues in there as well. And then finally, if you've ever been to Disneyland, you may have been on the monorail. So basic overview of vocabulary, what you're going to need to know for terminology for this is that when we talk about polymers, we're talking about these large molecules made up of repeating subunits. Each of those subunits is referred to as a monomer. All right, so let's do a little bit of concept check with vocabulary. So we have this prefix macro. What I want you to do is thinking back about what we talked about in the notes. What do you think that it means? Good, so hopefully you got that macro is big or large. How about mono? Good, that means one. And last, poly means many. All right, so make sure you have the examples down. You should have everything on the front of your page finished. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at any time.